Good morning and good afternoon, STEM class, and whoever decided to watch this video. And we're going to take a closer look at one of the most fascinating figures in American history. That person's name, Benjamin Franklin. Most of us know him from the $100 bill or as one of the founding fathers, but Franklin was also an extraordinary scientist and inventor whose discoveries still shape the technology we use every single day. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Ben Franklin was born on January 17th, 1706, in Boston, Massachusetts. He was one of 17 children, and his family had very little money. He attended school for only 2 years before his father could no longer afford tuition. But Franklin never stopped learning. He educated himself by reading every book he could get his hands on. As a teenager, he worked in his brother's print shop, which gave him access to ideas and newspapers from across the colonies. He eventually moved to Philadelphia, where he became a successful printer, publisher, and writer. He founded the Pennsylvania Gazette newspaper and created Poor Richard's Almanac, which became one of the most widely read publications in colonial America. But beyond his work as a printer and later as a diplomat and founding father, Franklin was something extraordinary. He was America's first great scientist, equally at home writing the Declaration of Independence as he was running electrical experiments from his backyard. What made Franklin such an effective scientist wasn't just intelligence, it was his approach. Franklin believed that truth came from careful observation, testing, and curiosity. Sound familiar? That's essentially what the scientific method is, and Franklin was practicing it long before it was taught in our textbooks. He once said, an investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. That quote captures exactly who he was, someone who believed that asking questions and seeking answers had real, lasting value. The scientific community recognized his genius early on. The Royal Society of London, one of the oldest and most respected scientific organizations in the world, accepted him as a fellow. He also received honorary degrees from Harvard, Yale, Oxford, and the University of St. Andrews. Quite a remarkable feat for someone who never graduated from school. Now let's get to the experiment Franklin is most famous for, the kite experiment of 1752. At the time, people had no idea what lightning actually was. Some thought it was a sign from God, others thought it was atmospheric fire. Franklin had a different idea. He believed that lightning was a form of electricity. To test this hypothesis, Franklin flew a kite made from a silk handkerchief during a thunderstorm. He attached a metal key at the bottom of the kite string, and a short length of wet hemp connected the key to a Leyden jar, a device used to store electrical charge. When the lightning charged the clouds above, electrical energy traveled down the wet string to the key, and Franklin observed sparks jumping from the key, confirming that lightning is indeed electricity. This was an enormous discovery. For the first time in human history, someone had demonstrated a connection between the awesome power of a thunderstorm and the small electrical charges scientists have been studying in laboratories. Franklin published his findings in a work called Experiments and Observations on Electricity, which was read by scientists across Europe and made him internationally famous. Once Franklin understood that lightning was electricity, he immediately thought about how to use that knowledge to protect people. The result was the lightning rod, one of the most practical and life saving inventions in history. Here's how it works. A metal rod, usually copper or aluminum, is mounted to the highest point of a building and connected to a wire that runs all the way into the ground. Because electricity follows the path of least resistance, when lightning strike, it travels down the rod and wire and safely into the ground, bypassing the building completely. Before the lightning rod, lightning strikes were responsible for countless fires, deaths, and the destruction of church buildings, homes, and ships. Interestingly enough, the lightning rod is still in use today. Every skyscraper you see, every cell tower, many aircraft, and millions of homes around the world rely on the same basic principle that Franklin developed in the 1750s. Here's something you might not know. The terms positive and negative, which you use in science class and sometimes here in STEM class, when talking about electrical charges, were invented by Ben Franklin himself. He was the first person to describe electrical charges using plus and minus to represent opposite forces. Franklin proposed that electricity flowed from what he called the positive to the negative side. Now, of course, we later discovered through modern science that electrons actually flow from negative to positives. So his direction was reversed, but his terms, his ideas, his words stuck. Every battery circuit board and electrical diagram in the world uses Franklin's positive and negative notation. Think about that. Every time you look at a battery and see the plus sign and the negative sign, you're looking at Ben Franklin's contributions to science. Franklin's scientific curiosity didn't stop with electricity. Let's take a quick tour of his other contributions. Bifocal glasses. As Franklin aged, he needed two pairs of glasses, one for reading and one for seeing at a distance. Rather than constantly swapping, he cut the lens in half and combined them to a single frame. That's what bifocal lenses are, and they are still widely used today. The Gulf Stream. Franklin was the first to systematically map the Gulf Stream, the powerful Atlantic Ocean current. He did this by carefully recording ocean temperatures during his many transatlantic voyages. His map helped ships crossing the Atlantic travel significantly faster. Heat absorption. Franklin noticed that a dark cloth laying in the snow melted the snow faster than a white cloth. This simple observation led him to the principle that dark colors absorb more solar heat than lighter colors, a concept that drives modern research in solar energy and building insulation, as well as, well, clothing insulation as well. Let's take a minute to connect Franklin's 18th century discoveries to the technology you interact with every single day. The lightning rod directly led to the grounding system and surge protectors built into every modern building and electrical device. When you plug a device into a three-prong outlet, that third prong uses a ground wire. That's Franklin's idea, updated for the modern world. Bifocal lenses evolved into the progressive lenses in glasses with multifocal contact lenses used by millions of people. Franklin's Gulf Stream mapping was the foundation of modern oceanography and scientific study of the ocean. Today, satellites track ocean currents to help with weather forecasting, shipping routes, and in understanding how our climate is always shifting. His work defined positive and negative charge and documented how electricity behaves in literally the language of every circuit ever built, from the first telegraph to the smartphone in your pocket. And his research in heat and color absorption influences the design of solar panels, which are engineered to absorb as much solar radiation as possible, using the same principle Franklin figured out by comparing snowmelt under dark and light cloth. Here's what makes Benjamin Franklin truly special as a scientist. He never patented a single invention. His belief was that scientific knowledge belonged to everyone and that sharing discoveries freely would benefit humanity more than protecting them for profit. In his own words, he hoped his work would, quote, serve the common good, end quote. Frankly proved that a curious mind, disciplined observation, and willingness to take smart risks like flying a kite in a thunderstorm could change the world. He didn't have a university laboratory or research team. He had curiosity, he had determination, and he used the scientific mindset. So, for you, if you're in the sixth grade STEM, that's an important message. Science isn't just something that happens in fancy labs. It happens when curious people ask good questions and work carefully to find the answers. So let's take a moment for a quick review. Benjamin Franklin used careful observation and experimentation to prove that lightning is electricity. From that discovery, he invented the lightning rod, which saved countless lives and still protects buildings all over the world today. He gave us the language of electrical scientists, positive and negative charge, terms and words that every scientist and engineer still uses. And his wide ranging curiosity drove contributions into optics, ocean science, medicine, and thermodynamics, all before the United States was even an independent nation. So here's something to think about. Which of Franklin's inventions or discoveries do you think had the greatest impact on modern life? Why? Well, go ahead and think about it, and at some point, well, your teacher just might ask you about it.